Hey, Phil here with videoschoolonline.com. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started with Adobe Premiere Pro in about 30 minutes. So we're going to cover all of the basics so you can just get started, start editing your projects. You'll know how to add and create projects, create new sequences, do basic edits, basic effects, color, and of course, exporting your video for online. So let's get started. There are downloadable resources. If you're watching this on Video School Online, you have access to them. You can download the resource folder with 3 shots that we're going to be using. If you're watching this elsewhere, just head over to videoschoolonline.com and enroll in the Adobe in 30 minutes course. So the first thing we're going to do is open up Adobe Premiere Pro. I'm using the Creative Cloud 2017 version. By the time you're watching this, there might be a new version, or maybe you're using an older version, and that's okay because most of what we're going to be covering you can do really with any version of Adobe Premiere Pro. The coloring is a little bit different than the previous versions like CS6 or CS5, but you can still use those versions to do most of what we're going to do in this class. When you open up Adobe Premiere Pro for the first time, you might not see recent projects. You probably won't actually, because these are all the projects that I've been working on. But whether you are for the first time or not, just go ahead and click the New Project button because we're going to start a new project from scratch. That brings up this new project module where we can name and create and set the settings for our project. I'm going to call this Adobe Premiere in 30. I'm going to choose where I want to put it by clicking Browse, putting it under the folder that I want. The rest of these things I leave as standard. These might be different depending on what computer you have. With my iMac, I have a Mercury playback engine that controls or helps with the graphics and processing. For scratch disk and ingest settings, I usually set these as, just leave them as set. All of the scratch disks I do same as project, so that no matter what, everything I create is all there in one folder. Then just click OK. When you first open up Premiere Pro, I'm hoping that the layout looks something similar to this with these panels up. If it doesn't, go up to Window, Workspaces, and then change it to Editing, and you should get a workspace that looks like this. You can customize your workspace and change which panels you have open. They have different preset workspaces. You can see that I have multiple workspaces that I like using depending on what type of project I'm working on. If I'm doing coloring, if I have 2 screens, that kind of thing. But as we work through this tutorial, you'll learn what some of these other panels do. To make any of these windows bigger or move them around, you can go to the edge and then click and drag up or down or left or right. You can also move the panels. For example, say I want the media browser panel, which is the tab behind the project panel, to be up here in this window. I can just click and drag, and if I just drop it in the middle, it will appear up in this window now. If I want to close any of these browsers, which I don't need, or tabs, I can just right click, say close panel. Okay? So again, we're going to work through some of these, and you don't need to know all of them right now to get started. I'm just going to walk through the basics. So let's get started with importing. There's a few different ways to import. One is by right-clicking in your project window and choosing import, or you can go to your Finder, and an easy way is just by dragging and dropping these clips or any of your assets, whether it's video, music, graphics, photos, and just dragging them into your project panel. If you're using a certain type of camera that doesn't shoot in MP4 files, or it's not an easy file type or file structure, you can find your video files under the media browser. Under the media browser, if you search for your the folder for your files, so for me, I'm going to go under Courses, Adobe Premiere Pro, Resources. You can see that now all these files appear right within Premiere Pro, and from here I can select these and drag them into my project file. They're already there, so I'm not going to do that. So I don't need to use the media browser for this footage. But if for some reason you're not able to import, try doing it through the media browser, or if you have any issues. Now we have all of our footage in our media project folder. To organize this, we can organize with folders. There's this new bin. What we call folders is bin in Premiere Pro. You can click that button. Usually I start with a video folder. Maybe I'll have a music folder, photos, graphics, sequences, that kind of thing. So I just selected these all and drag them into this folder. I can close it down now. The next thing you're going to want to do is start a new sequence, and think of your sequence as an individual video or an individual project where you're going to be actually adding video to it, editing it down, adding graphics, that kind of thing. The easiest way to do this to make sure that the video sequence matches the settings of the video that you're actually using is by dragging and dropping any of the video clips that you're using into this new item button down here that looks like a little post-it note with the corner flipped up. So if I do that, you'll see that this new sequence was created using the title of that media clip, and then we have this timeline pop up with that clip already on it. I can rename the sequence along with any of these media clips by clicking it and pressing return on my keyboard. So for this sequence, I'll call this Adobe in 30. And I'll move this outside of my video bin. Now, if I ever need to get back to this, or if I open up this project and it's not opened, I can just double click this sequence there. Another way of creating a sequence is just by clicking the new item button and clicking sequence. This brings up the new sequence module, and here you have to choose the settings that you want for your sequence. So maybe you do have specific settings that you're interested in using that aren't technically or aren't specifically the settings from your video clips. They have lots of presets here in the presets tab. If you go to settings, you can customize it. So say you want to make something that's a square for Facebook, you might want your frame size to be 1000 by 1000. That means it's going to be perfectly square. For the time base, and you might want to choose a different frame rate, maybe 2997. You can change all of these different settings, but typically you're just going to want to drag and drop the clip right into the new item button to create that. So let's just call this Facebook square. Click OK. So now we have this square project or sequence pop up over here in this timeline, and we can tab between our two sequences now. And now we can add our video to these sequences. So if I take shot 1 and drag it onto our timeline, you'll see there's multiple tracks on our timeline, both for the audio and the video. Let me just drop this down. And what happens is that it warns me there's a mismatch in the settings of the sequence and the settings of the clip. And that's because, remember, we just set the sequence settings as 1000 by 1000, whereas the settings for this clip are different. So for now, I'm just going to say keep existing settings. I can play through the timeline just pressing the play bar, or I can scrub through by clicking with this scrub bar right here and scrubbing through the timeline. Let's go back to our Adobe in 30 sequence. On the top of this timeline, you have 3 video tracks, 1, 2, 3. With audio, you have the same, 1, 2, and 3. And that's if you want to layer video clips on top of each other. If I bring my shot 2 and drag it onto layer 2, you'll see that the audio and the video go into layer or tracks 2 for the audio and video. Now, if I move this to the left just by clicking and dragging, play through it, it cuts from that shot to this shot. Makes sense? So whatever's on top in the video will play. With the audio, everything will play. So it doesn't matter if they're on top of each other or below each other, they're all going to play. Before we move on to actually how we edit our clips, let's go back to the Facebook Square timeline. I can zoom in on the timeline with the plus or minus keys on my keyboard. Those are right to the left of the delete key, or by clicking and dragging in the edge of this little timeline bar down here at the very bottom of the timeline. You can also scroll through your timeline by dragging it to the left or right. The size of this video doesn't necessarily match the size of this sequence. So there are a couple ways to make it match. One is by right-clicking and choosing Scale to Frame Size. But what happens is it scales the width down to 1000 pixels, which leaves these black bars of really nothing on the top and bottom. So I'm going to undo that by pressing Command Z. If I manually want to adjust the size, I can go to this Effects Controls tab up in the top left. If you don't see that, go to Windows, Effects Controls. For each clip or anything that you have on your timeline, you can click it and it brings up video effects up here. And you have different effects, such as your motion controls, which controls the motion, the scale, the rotation, the opacity, the speed. If you're selecting audio, there's audio levels. And this is where you can adjust those properties for this individual clip. So if I want to move it around, I can just click one of these position, the X-axis or the Y-axis, and drag to the left or right. See? For the scale, I can scale down. So I can click, drag down until I see it fit. So maybe I want it just to barely fit, so like 92 or so, and put it right where we see this sign. Play around with it, but that looks pretty good. Opacity, you can drop the opacity, increase the opacity. That's the transparency of this clip. Now, this doesn't really matter right now, but if you had two clips, one on top of each other, you would see that opacity. So say I bring down shot 2, put it right on top of shot 1, and then I drop the opacity of this top one, you can see the bottom one come through. So just another thing to keep in mind. So that's how you scale a video clip to a sequence with different settings. Say I brought down shot 3 and put it after this first shot, and I wanted to have the same exact settings as shot 1 applied to shot 3. An easy way to do it is just by going to the effects controls with shot 1 selected, select motion, copy it with Command C, and then select shot 3 and paste it with Command V. Control C and Control V if you're on a PC. And that adjusted the scale and position of this clip now. Let's go back to Adobe in 30 sequence that we're working on. I'm going to delete shot 2. And now I want to show you how to use the basic editing tools so that we can come up with a sequence of shots. We just have these 3 shots, but they all can work together to come up with a quick sequence. First, I'm going to put the rest of these shots after shot 1. So we're going to cut from shot 1 to 2 to 3. Let's first bring these 2 shots down into the timeline. Actually, let's go ahead and delete shot 3 because there's another way that I'm going to show you how we can make a selection. What I typically do is just put the shot down on the timeline, go to the very beginning of the shot and play through it, pressing the space bar. Then I kind of get a sense for what kind of shot I want, just sort of a pan across this sign right there. This was from a short documentary that I made with my buddy Will and Sam. It looks like as I scrub through, there's a later take right here that looks pretty cool. Nice. So I'm going to probably want this little bit right here. There's a couple ways to just cut out that bit. One is by just actually taking the left side of this clip. When I hover over it, you see this little icon, the mouse changes. And if I drag to the right, it's actually cutting out that first part of the clip. So now before there's nothing. If I play through it till we're done, okay, there we're done. I can take the right side now and drag to the left. Now we just have this bit of the clip. Now, what if I want this to play at the very beginning of this sequence? Well, I could just drag this to the left like this, and now that plays at 0 seconds. But I'm going to undo that, and there's another way I can do that just by clicking in this negative space, this little area between this clip and the start where there's nothing, and pressing the delete key on my keyboard. That's just a quick tip to make you more efficient as an editor. I'm going to undo that and show you one more way to make this even more efficient. Another keyboard shortcut that I use a lot is the up and down arrow keys, and that jumps you to each clip or each part of the clip, each cut. So if I press down, it takes me to this cut, down again to that cut, down to that start of that clip. So let me extend the first part of this clip to the left. If I hover over the left side of this clip and press Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and you see the little mouse becomes red or yellow instead of red. And then I drag to the right to the start of this clip where I want it to cut. Then I let go of the mouse. What happens is it automatically shifts all of those clips from the right to the left. So that's another efficiency tip that will make you an even faster editor. Okay, so now we have this one clip. Now let's find the part of this shot number 2 that we want. This is a shot where Anthony Carbajal, my buddy who's an amazing photographer, rolls by on his wheelchair. So I'm just scrubbing through, and I know this is the part where I want it. So let's go from right before he goes across the frame. And we can use our right and left arrow keys to go frame by frame in this video clip until it's perfectly where he's out of frame, right there. Instead of just dragging this to the right and doing it that way, I'm going to show you another tool, the razor tool. If you want to get to it through your keyboard shortcuts, just press C or just click the little razor blade right here and click right over that line. Now to delete this first part, we have to go back to our selection tool or press V on our keyboard, select it, press delete. Now remember how we delete this space right here in between these two clips? Just click in the middle until it's highlighted and press delete on our keyboard. Now if we go from this shot, let's play through. We've got the sign. Now we've got Anthony rolling by. So let's cut right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit with the plus sign. Press C to bring up razor, cut it, V to bring up my selection tool, and then select the rest of the shot and press D, delete on my keyboard or backspace to delete it. So now we have our 2 clips. Let's get the part of the third clip that we want to add to the last part of this scene right here. What I did right there was double click this clip and it brings it up in the source monitor. This is where you can preview your shots. So you can play through it with this play buttons down here, or you can, once it's up there, you can use the space bar, or you can scrub through it up here. So you can see this sort of tracking shot where we're following Anthony going through this alley. So we want to start right before he gets into the frame again. So to make a selection, because I can bring this shot down into my timeline just by clicking the video in the middle and dragging it down, but that brings down the whole shot. I'm going to undo that. So to make a selection, just a part of this clip, just press the I key on your keyboard or press this mark in button to set the in point, play through it until you're done, and then press the O key or press this mark out. We can always adjust these later just by dragging to the left or right, and we could also adjust it later if we have it down on our timeline. So let's bring this down on our timeline by clicking and dragging. Now you see that only that selection part of that clip is brought down. So now we have our 3 shots going from the sign to this shot to this shot. And what I notice is that that sequence kind of feels a little funny. So I think what will work better is if we put shot 2 after shot 3, we can rearrange them like this. Select multiple, drag them to the left if we want. So this is just a little bit of editing. We got him going through, and then probably right there, we'll cut to where Anthony is the side profile shot. Instead of cutting and doing all kinds of things, what I can do is just take this shot 2 and dragging to the left to where that our timeline indicator is. And this time it might help if Anthony is already in the frame. So I can extend this to the right, and I can already see in this shot that he's just about to pass this pole right here at the end of this shot. So we want to start right about there when he's passing it. So if I press Command on my keyboard, so I get that yellow mouse, drag to the right, it's going to automatically move that clip to the left after we've edited that first part out. So if I play through it, works pretty good. So that's a basics editing of a sequence of shots in Premiere Pro. We use the selection tool and the razor blade tool. There's other tools down here that you can play around with, but those 2 tools will get you very far. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes left. I want to just go over a few more things. One thing is, how do you adjust the volume? There's different ways to adjust the volume of individual clips. One is by selecting it. We saw in the effects controls panel that we have this audio effects option with the level. And the level of audio is read in dB, decibels. So if we decrease the decibels, it gets quieter. So that's one way. And you see as we apply that, this little FX button is highlighted to indicate that we've added or changed some sort of effect on this clip. Another way is if we expand the audio track, and we can expand the size of these tracks by double clicking in the area to the very right of this little box right here in that track. So right here, if I double click, or by clicking and dragging up or down sort of this line in between the track. So I can decrease the size or increase the size. When I do that for the audio, we see this line here, right here in the middle of the audio. That's the decibel level. If I decrease it or increase it, it's the same thing as doing it on the audio effects panel up here in the effects controls panel, but it's right on the timeline. And I find that a little bit easier to do. There's even other ways to increase or decrease audio, but those will get you pretty far, and you can do that for now. How about adding quick transitions? The basic default transitions are a crossfade for both audio and video. If we right click in the middle of a shot and choose apply default transition, what happens is we get a cross dissolve of the video and a constant power, which is basically just a cross dissolve of the audio. So if we play through that, you have that dissolve. If we want to make it longer, we can just click the edge of the cross dissolve and extend it, or make it shorter by making it smaller. We already learned about the effects controls, so that's one thing that we've already covered. What about just normal effects? There's an effects tab right here. If you don't see it, again, go up to Windows, Window, and then Effects. And you see lots of audio effects, video effects. In the video effects, there's lots of different things. This is how we used to do color correction in Premiere Pro. Under color correction, you have just a basic brightness contrast. And to apply any of these effects to a clip, just drag it and drop it onto a clip. To edit this effect, you'll see that in the effects controls window that this effect has been applied, brightness contrast. And each of these have numbers and sliders that you can just drag to the left or right, or click and input a number to apply that effect. To delete it, you can just select it and press delete. There's another way we're going to quickly go over with adding color, because you can tell with these video clips we shot in a very flat profile of the camera we were using, which was the Sony a7S. So to do basic color correction in Adobe Premiere Pro, we use what's called the Lumetri color panel. Now I have a full tutorial on the Video School Online YouTube channel on how to use this, so go there to learn how to actually use this panel. But to open it up, just go to Window, Lumetri Color. This is more similar to Adobe Lightroom if you've used that in the past. Now we can select our clip, and we have these different rooms or these different tabs. We have basic corrections where we can adjust just the individual shadows, the blacks, the whites, giving us much more control over how this looks. Because this is such a flat profile, we will really increase the saturation and the contrast by dropping down the blacks and the shadows. You have more creative profiles, creative looks, where you can scroll through these, and they actually have preset looks that you can apply to your footage. If you are using a LUT, a lookup table, you can actually import lookup tables through this look. So if you have that on your computer, that's a little advanced. So there's lots of things you can do with the Lumetri color panel. Again, if you want to learn all the rest, just head over to Video School Online's YouTube channel to learn how to do that. One of the other main things you might want to learn is how to add titles. Again, I have a YouTube tutorial that's like 20 or 30 minutes long that explains exactly how to use titles, so check that out on the Video School Online YouTube channel. But basically, with the latest version of Premiere Pro Creative Cloud, there's a new type tool down here in our tools bin. Click that, click on our video itself. Once you do that, it creates this graphic layer that's above our clip. if we type in here, Anthony Carbajal, that's my buddy's name, and then we open up a new panel called Essential Graphics. I'm going to move this over here to this panel over here, this window, and then go to the Edit tab. This is how we could edit the position, the size, the text font, the style, the color, the stroke, everything right here in this panel. Again, sorry I keep doing this, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Just head over to youtube.com/videoschoolonline and search for the Essential Graphics tutorial that walks you through how to do this. So now you see that this title just appears right here on top of this clip. What if I just want it to appear on this clip? Let's just move it to the right and then cut the right part of this off so it's only as long as this clip. So now it appears right there. Cool. So those are some basic things to get started with Adobe Premiere Pro. How about exporting or saving our projects so that we can post it online? The first thing we want to do on our sequence is set the in and out point for where we want to export. So we definitely want to export from the beginning. So what we do is put our timeline indicator at the very beginning at 0 seconds, press the I button like we did up in the source panel. And then if we go to the right, to the very end of this clip, I'm just going to go there and press down on my keyboard to get to the end of that last clip and press O, and that sets our out point. Okay. Now I'm going to go in just a couple frames, end it right after Anthony gets out of the frame. I'll set an O there. To export, just go to File, Export, Media, or press Command M, Control M if you're on a PC. This brings up our export settings. Up here in the top right, what I usually export as is H.264, which is a low quality but high quality but low file size type of file. For preset, it depends on what you're doing with it, but they have lots of presets such as YouTube 1080p HD. So that's typically what I would select if I was putting this on YouTube. For output name, I can click that and also choose where I'm going to export it. Click Save. Down here, we can adjust any of these settings. We can change the size if for some reason we want it to be smaller. I don't suggest making it bigger because you're just going to be blowing up the video, which won't actually increase the quality. It's just going to make it a little bit blurry and pixelated at that bigger size. For bitrate settings, this is an important setting for if you want to decrease the file size even more, which they actually preview or estimate down here as 15 megabytes. But if I change the target bitrate to 8, for example, then it's going to change the file size to something lower. But for full quality at 1920 1080, leave that at 16. There's a couple options that I just click because why not? It's really hard to tell the quality that well, especially on a computer monitor. But if I click render at maximum depth, and then down here, use maximum render quality, and then under bitrate encoding, I'll change it to VBR2 pass, which actually goes through twice so that it should have the highest quality possible. You can either click export and it will just start exporting right away within Premiere Pro. But a cool thing about Premiere Pro is that you can actually queue this and export it with Adobe Media Encoder. So let me show you how to do that. If I just press Q, it's going to open up Adobe Media Encoder, which is a separate program. But if you have Creative Cloud, you can download it for free or with your package. And what this allows you to do is to actually continue working in Premiere Pro while Media Encoder exports your video. This is great if you're editing a lot of videos or different projects, because before, or if I just clicked export, I would have to wait until this exported from Premiere Pro to continue working on any other project or this project. Now Adobe Media Encoder has popped open. We can change the settings right through here, but we've already set those. So I'm just going to press this play button for starting the queue, and it's going to start exporting this video. Now we can go back to Adobe Premiere Pro and continue working. Depending on the speed of your computer, this is going to take longer or shorter. I usually recommend at least 16 gigabytes of RAM or memory for your computer, plus a decent graphics card. I have a little bit of an older iMac. I think it's the 2013 version with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it seems to do quite fine. With 4K footage, it does tend to lag a little bit if I'm adding a lot of effects to it. If I go to Finder, I can see now our Adobe in30 export. It's only 8 seconds long, and this would be perfect for uploading online. Haven't done a lot to it, still need to do some basic color correction, fix the titles, add some audio, but this is a basic video sequence that we've created in Premiere Pro in just 30 minutes. So now that you know how to use Adobe Premiere Pro, I think you can make some really cool videos in less than 30 minutes using the tools that we've covered in this class. If you want to learn more and cover the complete Adobe Premiere Pro software from A to Z, I have a full Adobe Premiere Pro course. You can head over to videoschoolonline.com, check it out. It's great for beginners. So if you thought this was great but just barely scratched the surface, if you thought this was a little too fast, if you want to learn but have more project-based learning, then please check that out. A lot of people have really enjoyed that class, and it's a great way to learn Adobe Premiere Pro. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you in another video.